You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's go over the new schedule outlook for Syracuse football this upcoming season. And I broke it up into 4 separate categories of tiers of games and the likelihood of Syracuse winning. And right before I even mentioned Georgia Tech and where they are, they moved up a tier in my eyes after they beat Florida State yesterday, 24-21, upsetting the number 10 Noles. And Seminoles, you're done. You're not in college football playoff conversation anymore. But that's besides the point, right? This isn't going to be, I'm not going to dunk on Florida State this entire episode. It's a Syracuse podcast. So let's go over the schedule. This first category is what I like to call the cupcake category. I've mentioned it with Syracuse basketball and the cupcakes that they have scheduled on their schedule. So there are 2 games in my mind that are absolute slam dunk. No doubt in my mind, Syracuse is going to win. They're 2 home games. It's Holy Cross at home and UConn at home. I would say that Syracuse has a 99% chance of beating UConn. And against Holy Cross, I think it would be moved up to 99.999999999%. So I don't know exactly how many nines I counted out, but maybe if they played 1,000,000 times, Syracuse would lose 1 time against Holy Cross. They're going to beat Holy Cross. They're going to beat UConn. Those are slam dunk cupcakes for Syracuse. So we can chalk it up 2 wins right there for Syracuse. All right. This next category is where we expand a little bit. There's going to be 4 teams in this category, and this is where, in my mind, Georgia Tech moved up. This is the quote-unquote should win category, where Syracuse should win these games. They should win all 4 of these games I'm going to mention, but for one reason or another, there is an outside chance that they do lose. And those 4 games are Ohio in week 1, right? They should beat Ohio in week 1. But at the end of the day, you look at the point spread, I believe it's about 17.5 on FanDuel. So it wouldn't be inconceivable if Syracuse loses that game. Having said that, I think we all expect that Syracuse should beat Ohio. And I think they're going to beat. Okay. They should beat Ohio. I'm picking Syracuse to beat Ohio. In fact, I think they're going to cover 17.5. But it is in the range of outcomes where if literally everything goes wrong for Syracuse, they could lose. Hopefully they don't. I don't think they will. All right. I'm not being pessimistic. So that's the should win. Ohio is in it, obviously, as I just mentioned. Stanford at home is a should win. And the reason why I just put that in the should win category is because Stanford is an ACC team, and you don't want to overlook anyone within your conference. Bottom line, they're in the ACC. Let's not overlook them, even though they should be a bottom feeder within the conference this season. At Pitt and at Boston College, I think are games where Syracuse should definitely win. But at the same time, look, in conference, on the road. So those are not going to be easy for Syracuse this upcoming season. So in total, we got 2 cupcakes and 4 games where I think Syracuse should win. I think worst case scenario, they are absolute worst case, it's 4-2. Best case, obviously 6-0. 5-1 is possible. They could lose one of the road games at Pitt, at BC. Not necessarily think, but 4-2 and 6-0 is the range of outcomes here. All right. Then we got 4 toss-up games, and this is where Georgia Tech moved up into. In my mind, the Yellow Jackets moved from a game I thought Syracuse should win, but would be kind of a tough test, to now it's a toss-up. I think it can go either way. I think it's going to be 50-50. If I had to guess, I haven't checked if there's any money line on that game, but I think Syracuse might be a slight favorite given that they are the home team. But I don't even know if it's going to be like a 3 points. Syracuse could easily be like a 1.5 at home. I'm not entirely sure what that spread is going to be, but that's a toss-up game now against Georgia Tech. At UNLV, we have discussed on this show that is the toughest non-conference game on Syracuse's schedule, and it's not even particularly close. That's the toughest one. Virginia Tech at home could be a tough challenge for Syracuse. That can go either way. And I also will put this game in here at Cal. Now, Cal might not necessarily be a great team, but going to the West Coast, I don't think is going to be easy. So I'm going to put that in the toss-up category for Syracuse. All right, so those are the toss-ups. Georgia Tech at UNLV, Virginia Tech at home at Cal. And now this final category, I'm not going to say that Syracuse is going to lose these two games, but they are certainly, just looking at the schedule, the toughest games on the Orange's schedule. At NC State and Miami at home. I think if you go 1-1, that would be outstanding. That would be terrific. Hopefully, at minimum, they can just keep it close in those games. Just keep it close. Remember, in college football, unless you literally win every single game, which you can, there's no one saying that you can't, in a power conference, right? Style points do matter when losses are starting to be taken into account, right? Style points matter in college. So hopefully you can keep it at least close at NC State and Miami at home. Those are certainly the tougher games on Syracuse's schedule. Now, the good news in my mind is that if we're talking about Syracuse making a bowl game, which of course I think they're going to be, I'm not changing my record prediction. I think they're going to go 8-4. The Georgia Tech game at home is not a must-win game in my mind to at least make a bowl. It's not a must-win for a bowl game because there are still 6 cupcakes or should-win games on the schedule. And if I'm being honest, I think Syracuse has a greater chance of going 6-0 in those games than 6-0 than losing all 6 in the tough and toss-up category, if that makes sense to you all. I'll repeat that. They got 6 games against cupcakes or games that they should win. Syracuse has a higher likelihood of going 6-0 in that stretch than losing the 6 games, all of them, in the toss-up category and the tough category. So I think at minimum they're going to be a bowl team. And the Georgia Tech game, in my mind, is not going to determine whether or not Syracuse makes a bowl or not. It could determine what type of bowl game that Syracuse is invited to, because undoubtedly if you win, you have a higher record, but it's not going to determine if Syracuse actually makes a bowl or not. Before yesterday, I would have put Georgia Tech in the quote-unquote should-win category. And then, of course, Yellow Jackets beat the Seminoles. So now I'm going to put them in the toss-up category. I think they have earned that right. They are probably going to be a ranked team. It's going to be a great opportunity for Syracuse. I ran a poll on Twitter, which is at @LO_Syracuse. And for the most part, you guys agreed with me that Georgia Tech at home is now a toss-up game. If we're going to talk a little bit about the college football playoff, I think Syracuse is going to have to go at minimum 10-2 in the regular season, and they can't have any losses against those cupcakes or should-win teams. Okay, that's the bottom line with the college football playoff, but we're still so far out right now that I don't really want to talk about it too much. We'll see how Syracuse does in that against Georgia Tech in week 2 before we start maybe talking about the college football playoff in the ACC.